Hello, I'm Brigantia Blackbird of Blackbird's Brew. Happy Tuesday and welcome back to our Pagan Problems. This week we're going to be talking about how we can localize our practice because sometimes I think we get so caught up in how things used to be for our ancestors, specifically if they were an ocean away from us or on another continent, that we forget to recenter ourselves about where we are now. Now, obviously, our pagan ancestors did not have the advantages of our modern technology, but despite that, a lot of pagan cultures were known for how widely they traveled, but it required far greater time, effort, and planning than what we are accustomed to in our modern times. It's also worth noting that while individuals within these civilizations had traveled far and wide, the people as a whole tended to stay put. Where you were at is pretty much where you were going to be. Consequently, for the vast majority of human history, people just did not have the opportunity or the means to really roam too far afield. The family farm, the nearest village, the the keep of the nearest liege lord, that essentially made up a person's whole world, more or less. Now, as our own cost of living goes up and the cost to fuel our vehicles gets scandalously higher, no doubt many of us in the here and now have felt our world just contract. Now, it's true that as long as we have internet access, we are not completely cut off. At least we can still communicate with other people who are far away. However, it remains that we are not traveling as much and we're not getting to experience as much of the world firsthand. This also affects our spiritual practices. Whether we're wanting to go see the lands that our ancestors dwelled in or the remains of ancient holy sites, or we just like being able to order herbs and spices from far away that we can't grow for ourselves because they don't like the climate. Costs for all of this have gone up, and this limits what we're able to reasonably afford and what we can actually do. Now, ancient pagans and magical practitioners, they did not have the whole world at their disposal to practice their faith, nor did they have to be wealthy in order to cultivate a good relationships with the gods or to practice any magical craft. So if they could manage, so can we. And of course, it begins, as always, with our mindset. If we can teach ourselves not to see localizing our practice as a restriction, but rather as an opportunity to be fully rooted where we live, we won't be getting in our own way nearly as much as we make these adjustments. Those who came before us, they made the most of the resources that were around them. They knew what plants were there, what time of year they made an appearance, and what sorts of things those plants were good for. There was a keen awareness of the local wildlife, both for hunting and to know what predators to be on the lookout for in your neighborhood. Different rocks, materials, and gems that were in the area, these were used for both practical and spiritual purposes. The surviving lore teaches us that each plant, animal, and mineral has more than one magical purpose and more than one kind of spiritual significance. Chances are that the natural world is already abundantly providing for our spiritual needs if we just learn the ins and the outs of the land around us. So let's get to know where we live. Whether we are in a city, a small town, or we're out in the countryside, let's go outside and just see what we can find. And of course, for general information, look up the website for your state's conservation department. That'll give you a pretty good idea of what species and plants and animals are native to your state, as well as any significant natural sites and points of interest. There may be more variety than what you first thought. I also suggest having a special section in your notebook specifically reserved for information and lore about native plants, animals, and minerals. Research their spiritual and magical associations so far as what you're able to. Not everything is going to necessarily have a record. So when you have the opportunity, and it's safe to do so, exercise common sense. Don't come crying to me because you picked up a rattlesnake and it bit you. Common sense. You do not have to do that in order to learn about the animal themselves and their spiritual significance. Common sense. But if it's safe to actually handle something, and you do take the opportunity to get first-hand experience with these things, make note of the kind of energy you're picking up on, and brainstorm ideas about how this could potentially be used in your practice, and then, of course, experiment. Know your immediate environment, whether it's urban, suburban, or rural. Every place has its own spirit, and it's made up of these layers and layers of history and things that have taken place on the land itself, all the various cultural influences that have come in over time, and the people living there. in this moment, know what their energy is like, and be able to learn to kind of pick up on that in the air from moment to moment. Take walks as often as you can to know the place better, but also to open up your senses and to get a better idea of what kind of ambient energy is surrounding you. Over time, as you pick up on this energy and you observe the behaviors and the customs of people around you, it will give you greater insight, and there's no telling just how useful that might be to you one day. And utilize local materials as much as you can, especially if it's more cost effective or better yet free. Anything that's readily available is going to be easier to experiment with for magical purposes, and we're well served to learn just how versatile some things really are, as well as knowing what their limitations are. And sometimes we'll be lucky enough to learn something new and unexpected, and then we can share that with others. We are not trapped where we live. We have a chance to be rooted, and we have an opportunity to have more than just a passing acquaintance with it. We can do more than just take up space, in other words. This will deepen our sense of being at home, and it will forge strong connections to the spirits of the land where we live. That connection also feeds our connection to the deities we worship. These beings are present even if we're in a densely populated city or we are in the middle of nowhere miles away from the nearest neighbor. We have only to look for them to find the fingerprints of their influence, and learning all we can about where we are makes them all the easier to see. So I hope this has jumpstarted your thought process on this issue, and I hope you are having some ideas and you're ready to explore the idea of maybe everything you need spiritually and magically is right where you are. Not to say that we're always going to be in a situation where we have a super high cost of living and super high fuel prices and everything else, but if this is going to be our state of affairs for a while, this is a good time to learn how to adapt and be able to adapt in a way that we don't feel the sense of deprivation that we otherwise might have. So I think that is it for the present moment. If you haven't joined us already at Blackbird's Brew, we would love to see you. There's a link to join in the description below, as well as links to where you can find this content on other platforms. I do suggest, if you do like my content, to follow me at least on one other platform, even if you don't check in there regularly, just because, YouTube is YouTube, and you never know when you might be on the wrong end of it. So just to be safe, try to find me elsewhere, if the time ever comes. Beyond that, if you have any thoughts, feel free to leave them in the comment section below. I do try to not only read, but interact with everyone who's kind enough to give me their time and attention. I know it's not something that anyone has to do, and I do appreciate it when people, make the effort. But I think that's it for now. I will see you in the next one. Bye.